It was the night of the mating ceremony, the night when Omegas were dressed like jewels, paraded before the kingdom's noblest alphas, and commanded to choose their fated mate with a kiss. Those who refused were claimed by force, often by the most ruthless alpha bidder. Prince Arendor Valerius, youngest son of the royal house, sat stiffly as attendants fussed over his attire. A coronet of pearls was set in his dark hair, his pale throat adorned with a collar of woven silver. His robes of ivory silk clung to his slender frame, embroidered with threads that shimmered like moonlight. His beauty was breathtaking, an Omega's allure carefully honed for the spectacle, yet his violet eyes burned with quiet rebellion. "Your Highness mustn't frown," a maid whispered nervously. "The dukes will be watching. The alphas—" "I do not care for the alphas," Arendor said sharply, before softening his tone. "Forgive me, it is only— this ball feels more like a cage than a celebration." He knew who awaited him tonight, Duke Marcellus Draconis, the most feared alpha in the kingdom. His wealth rivaled the crown's, his soldiers more loyal than the king's guard. Everyone whispered that Marcellus would claim Arendor as his prize. Arendor's stomach knotted at the thought of his lips being stolen in front of the kingdom. Meanwhile, outside the glittering hall, in the cold corridors where servants carried trays of wine and musicians tuned their lutes, a figure moved unseen. A man in beggar's rags, hood low over his face, dirt smeared across sharp features, leaned against a pillar, watching the procession. His hands were roughened, his boots scuffed, yet his back was impossibly straight for a pauper. This was King Alaric, ruler of the realm, hidden beneath disguise. He had grown weary of empty courtiers and simpering Omegas who sought only his crown. Tonight, he would walk among them as no one, to see who dared to meet the eyes of a beggar. When his gaze fell upon the Omega prince entering the ballroom, Arendor with moonlit grace and storm in his eyes, something ancient stirred in him. The ceremony began. Music soared, goblets clinked, and Omegas were guided to the dais. One by one, noble alphas stepped forward, offering hands, vows, promises of riches and power. When Duke Marcellus approached, towering in black and gold armor, the crowd hushed, his hand extended toward Arendor like a snare. "My prince," Marcellus drawled, his voice dark honey. "The kingdom awaits your choice. Grant me the honor of your kiss." Arendor's breath caught. If he refused, the king himself would force the match. If he obeyed, he would be trapped forever. His pulse thundered as the hall closed in on him. Then, from the corner of his eye, he saw him, a beggar, half hidden behind servants, watching with a gaze like fire beneath the hood. And before thought could stop him, Arendor descended from the dais, silks whispering against marble, and seized the ragged stranger by the collar. Gasps echoed through the hall. Arendor pressed his lips to the beggar's. Warmth, strength, the faint taste of danger and promise. The ballroom fell silent, shocked into stillness. The prince had chosen, yet none recognized the man he kissed. Only the beggar's hand lifted, steady and sure, cradling Arendor's back as though he had been waiting for this moment, and deep beneath his disguise, the Alpha King smiled. The ballroom roared to life after the silence, voices colliding like thunderclaps. "Who is he?" "The prince kissed a beggar. Sacrilege. He has shamed the kingdom." Nobles fanned themselves furiously, some swooning, others shouting for guards. The orchestra faltered into uneasy silence, bows trembling over strings. Prince Arendor's heart pounded in his chest, his lips still tingling with the heat of the kiss. He had not planned this. He had only wished to escape Marcellus's cruel hand, and in his desperation, the stranger in rags had seemed like freedom. But now, as he met the man's gaze, eyes like molten amber under the shadow of the hood, he felt something he had never known before, not just relief, but recognition, as though his soul had stumbled into its match. "Seize him!" Marcellus's bellows split the air. His armored fist slammed against the marble rail. "That filthy cur dares steal the lips of a royal Omega? Drag him forth!" Guards rushed forward, but the beggar did not flinch. He lifted his head, and though dirt smudged his cheek, his bearing was regal, his presence commanding. The soldiers slowed, unease pricking their instincts. "Touch me, and you will regret it," the beggar said, his voice low but thunderous enough to still the hall. The guards froze, the crowd murmured. Omegas shivered, and Alphas bristled, sensing in that tone a dominance that could not be counterfeited. Arendor's eyes widened. This was no ordinary man. Duke Marcellus recovered first, lips curling in a snarl. Do you think a cloak of filth will hide you from my wrath? Omega, you have disgraced your family, your court, and your duty. Choose me now, or I will— No. The single word fell from Arendor's lips like a blade. His voice shook, but the defiance in it made the hall shudder. He turned, facing Marcellus fully. I have chosen. My kiss is given. The law is clear. Gasps rose again, louder, sharper. The mating ceremony was sacred. Once an Omega's lips touched another's in choice, the bond could not be denied. Marcellus's face darkened like a storm. He could not overturn tradition without branding himself a usurper. His jaw worked with suppressed fury. You will regret this, he hissed. You will beg for my chains before the end. The beggar stepped forward then, placing himself protectively between Arendor and Marcellus. His hand brushed against the Omega's sleeve, just a touch, but enough to steady the prince's trembling frame. Leave the prince be, he commanded, his tone final. Marcellus's nostrils flared. He stalked away, but not before casting a venomous glare at both of them. The crowd dispersed in uneasy whispers. The ceremony, broken by scandal, was declared finished. Arendor's attendants rushed toward him, faces pale with panic, but he barely heard them. His world had narrowed to the stranger at his side. You, Arendor whispered, his voice raw. Who are you really? The beggar's golden eyes caught the chandelier light, fierce and untamed. His lips curved, not unkind, but with a secret he wasn't ready to tell. For now, he said softly, I am the man who caught your kiss. And though Arendor should have been terrified, his pulse quickened, not with fear, but with something far more dangerous. Desire. The Grand Celestine Palace never slept, but tonight it trembled. Whispers slithered through its halls like smoke, of scandal, of betrayal, of the Omega Prince who had kissed a beggar instead of an Alpha Duke. Within his chamber, Arendor sat by the tall arched window, staring at the gardens bathed in moonlight. The silks of his ceremonial robes pooled around him, heavy as chains. His attendants had long since left, bowing and wringing their hands, muttering warnings that tomorrow the court would tear him apart. He pressed trembling fingers to his lips. They still burned with the memory of that kiss, firm, steady, shockingly warm. Not a drunken brush nor a cruel theft, but a kiss that felt claimed. Why? Why did his heart beat as though it already knew the stranger? He should feel shame, he should feel fear. Yet instead, an intoxicating heat curled low in his stomach. A soft creak disturbed the silence. The balcony doors opened without a sound. Arendor startled, his hand flying to the jeweled dagger hidden in his sash. Who's there? He demanded, his voice sharper than he felt. From the shadows stepped the beggar, still cloaked in ragged garments, but with his hood lowered, the moonlight unveiled the truth of his face, angular jaw, high cheekbones, lips shaped with quiet command, and eyes like molten amber burning in the dark. You, Arendor whispered, breathless. He should have called for guards. Instead, his grip on the dagger loosened. The beggar's gaze softened when it met his. Forgive me for entering unbidden, but I could not leave you to the wolves tonight. Arendor's throat tightened. He wanted to demand answers, but his body betrayed him, drawn closer, caught in that Alpha's gravity. You ruined me, Arendor said finally, though his voice trembled more with confusion than anger. The court will brand me a fool, a traitor to my blood. Do you understand what you've done? I understand, the beggar said quietly, moving closer, every step radiating calm dominance. But I also know this. You saved yourself from the Duke, and you kissed not a beggar, but a man who will stand before any blade for you. Arendor's breath caught. He wanted to laugh at such impossible words, yet he could not tear his eyes away. You speak as though— His words trailed off as the beggar drew nearer, close enough that Arendor could feel the heat of his body. As though what? The beggar asked, voice low, intimate. As though I matter to you. The beggar's lips curved faintly. You do. The chamber fell into silence, broken only by the quickened beat of Arendor's heart. He whispered, almost against his will, Who are you really? The beggar reached out, fingertips brushing a strand of hair from Arendor's cheek. The touch was tender, reverent, but it carried the weight of authority no commoner could ever possess. One day, I will tell you everything, he murmured. But tonight, all you need know is this. your kiss is not wasted. You chose me, and I will not let the world take that from you." Arendor shivered, torn between terror and longing. His body leaned forward before his mind could stop it, drawn into the warmth of that hand, and when the beggar bent low, lips hovering just a breath away, Arendor closed his eyes, not in fear, but in surrender. The night air clung cool and fragrant with jasmine drifting in from the gardens. Moonlight painted silver trails across the marble floor of Arendor's chamber, framing the beggar's silhouette as though the heavens themselves had carved him from shadow and flame. Arendor stood frozen beneath that gaze. He had been raised to fear alphas, to see them as predators who would use his body as a bond and his life as a tool. Yet the man before him did not seize, did not demand. He only looked at him with a gravity that drew Arendor closer without force, like a tide claiming the shore. "You should leave," Arendor whispered, though every nerve in his body betrayed the plea. "If the guards find you here, they won't." The beggar's voice was calm, steady, threaded with a confidence that sent a shiver down the Omega's spine. He took another step forward, closing the distance between them. Arendor's breath caught. His back brushed against the carved wooden frame of his bed, silks pooling at his wrists. He could not retreat further, though every instinct screamed that he should. The beggar raised a hand, hovering just above his cheek without yet touching. "Tell me to stop," he said softly, "and I will." The choice was Arendor's. For the first time in his life, an alpha gave him that, but he could not. His lips parted, his breath trembling. "Don't stop." The beggar's fingers brushed his skin, warm, calloused, startlingly gentle. His thumb lingered beneath Arendor's jaw, lifting his face slightly. Their eyes locked, and the world beyond the chamber vanished. No scandal, no Marcellus, no court. Only this heat that made his body ache with need he had never dared name. The beggar leaned down, so close that Arendor could feel his breath ghost against his lips. Their mouths hovered a hair's breadth apart. And then, a sharp rap at the door. Arendor flinched, panic flashing in his eyes. The beggar melted back into shadow, retreating toward the balcony, just as the heavy oak doors swung open. "Your Highness." A court attendant rushed in, pale and sweating. "Forgive me, but urgent news. Duke Marcellus demands audience at dawn. He claims tonight's scandal was an affront to his honor, and he intends to challenge your choice." Arendor's heart plunged. A duel? A political strike? He did not know what Marcellus planned, only that the man would not let humiliation pass. The attendant bowed and fled, leaving the chamber once more in silence. Arendor turned, but the beggar was gone, the balcony doors swaying gently in the night breeze. Only the lingering warmth on his skin told him he had not dreamed it. He pressed trembling fingers to his lips again. He had almost kissed him, almost surrendered to a man whose true name and rank he did not even know. And yet, in his chest, something fierce whispered, "I would have." The palace awoke in an uproar. By dawn, gossip had spread from the banquet hall to the city gates. The prince kissed a beggar. The sacred rite was defiled. The duke was humiliated before all. Servants whispered in corners. Betas carried scandal like wildfire. Alphas seethed that tradition had been mocked. And at the heart of it all, Prince Arendor sat in his chamber, hands folded tightly in his lap, every muscle wound like a bowstring. The chamber doors burst open. His elder brother, Crown Prince Theodoric, stormed in, golden armor gleaming, his jaw sharp with fury. "Do you realize what you've done?" Theodoric spat. "The dukes are calling for blood. Marcellus has petitioned Father to void your choice. He claims the man you kissed was not even alpha-born." Arendor's fingers clenched on the silken sheets. "I don't care what he claims. The law is clear. My kiss is binding. You kissed a beggar," Theodoric snarled, looming over him. "Do you understand the shame you've dragged upon us? The king himself is furious." Arendor lifted his chin, though his voice shook. "Better a beggar than Marcellus's leash." For the first time, Theodoric faltered. A flicker of something, concern perhaps, flashed in his eyes. But he turned away, pacing sharply. "You have no idea what storm you've unleashed." Far from the royal wing, in the abandoned chapel beneath the palace, Duke Marcellus poured dark wine into a silver chalice, his expression carved from wrath. "A beggar," he growled, his voice echoing off stone. "A nameless cur dares stand between me and the prince. I'll see him chained, whipped, and broken before the court." A beta advisor bowed low. "But my lord, if the prince's choice stands, then I'll crush it," Marcellus snapped. "If law cannot break him, then chains will." find the beggar, drag him to me." That evening, as lanterns flickered along the palace gardens, Arindor slipped from his chamber with only a cloak around his shoulders. He could not breathe under the weight of his brother's rage, his father's silence, and the court's whispers. He needed solitude, air. Instead, he found him. The beggar stood waiting beneath the old willow by the reflecting pool, moonlight turning his amber eyes to fire. "You," Arindor breathed, heart leaping in spite of himself. "How did you— Some doors," the beggar said, voice low, "open for me without question." Arindor's suspicion sparked again. Who was this man truly? No pauper could stride past guards, no commoner could command such presence. But when the beggar stepped closer, the questions melted under the heat that coiled in Arindor's chest. "You shouldn't be here," Arindor whispered. "If Marcellus finds you, let him," the beggar said, fierce and steady. "He cannot take what is already mine." The words struck like thunder. Arindor's breath caught, his pulse stumbling. "Mine." The beggar's hand brushed his cheek again, reverent, claiming without force. Arindor's knees weakened, and before he could stop himself, he leaned into that touch, craving it like air. "Tell me your name," Arindor whispered, desperate now, aching with the need to know. But the beggar only bent close, his lips grazing Arindor's ear with a promise. In time. And as the night wrapped around them, hidden eyes in the shadows watched, the Duke's spies already closing in. The gardens lay still beneath the silver wash of moonlight, the surface of the reflecting pool rippling with the whisper of night wind. Arindor stood close enough to feel the beggar's warmth, his pulse unsteady, his lips parted with questions that burned hotter by the second. But the air shifted, a crack of a twig, the rustle of leaves, the prickle of instincts Arindor had been taught never to ignore. The beggar's golden eyes narrowed. His hand slid from Arindor's cheek to his wrist, firm but protective. "We are not alone," he murmured. From the hedges, armored men surged forth, 6 in total, cloaked in Marcellus's black crest. Their swords gleamed in the moonlight, their boots pounding the earth. "There," the leader barked. "Take him alive. The Duke wants the cur delivered in chains." Arindor's breath froze. "No, wait, you don't understand." He moved as if to shield the beggar, his body trembling, yet the stranger only eased him back, steady, unshaken. "Stay behind me," the beggar commanded. The soldiers charged. In the space of a heartbeat, the world transformed. The beggar shed stillness like a discarded cloak, moving with lethal grace. His hand caught the first soldier's blade mid-swing, metal shrieking against his palm, and with a flick of raw strength, he snapped the sword in two. Gasps tore from the men. Arindor's eyes widened in shock, his breath trapped in his lungs. No beggar could do this. No common alpha even. The power radiating from him was ancient, primal, commanding every instinct in Arindor to yield. Another soldier lunged. The beggar pivoted, faster than sight, his fist striking the man's chest with such force the soldier flew back into the hedges. The ground shook. "Monsters," one whispered. The beggar's amber gaze flared like molten fire. "Run back to your master," he said, voice deep and resonant with alpha authority. "Tell him, this one is not his to claim." Something in that voice froze the soldiers' blood. They hesitated only a moment before retreating, dragging their fallen with them, disappearing into the night. Arindor stood rooted, his cloak slipping from his shoulders, his heart hammering. The garden was silent again, but nothing was the same. "You—" his voice cracked, his lips trembling as he tried to shape the truth. "You cannot be—" The beggar turned, his expression softened by the sight of Arindor's shock. He reached out, gently brushing the Omega's trembling fingers with his own. "I never lied," he said quietly. "I told you some doors opened for me. I told you your kiss was not wasted." Arindor's throat worked. Then, "Who are you?" The beggar's eyes burned with unspoken truth. For a moment it seemed he might speak it, might shatter the illusion entirely. But instead he leaned down, his breath warm against Arindor's ear, and whispered, "Yours." Arindor's knees nearly buckled. He could not breathe. His body knew before his mind could. This was no beggar. This was an alpha like no other. And in the shadows beyond the hedges, Marcellus himself watched, teeth bared in a smile sharp as knives. "This game," the Duke murmured, "is only beginning." The throne room of the Celestine Palace had never been so crowded. Nobles in embroidered silks crowded the marble aisles. Alphas bristling with challenge, betas whispering behind fans, omegas clutching their collars as though they were chains. The scent of tension, spiced wine, sweat, and fear hung thick in the air. At the far end, the great obsidian throne stood empty. The king had summoned the court, but he had not yet arrived. Arendor sat stiffly on the Omega dais, dressed in robes of pale blue, his hair braided with silver thread. His violet eyes swept the crowd, but his pulse hammered with dread. He knew why they were gathered. Marcellus had demanded it, the voiding of his kiss, the stripping of his choice. He had not seen the beggar, his beggar, since last night's ambush in the garden. The memory of golden eyes and impossible strength still haunted him. He had touched the truth but had not heard it. Now, before the eyes of the kingdom, he would be forced to defend what he could not explain. The herald's staff struck the marble. His Majesty Alaric, sovereign king of the Celestine throne. A hush fell. The doors opened and he entered. Not in rags, not cloaked in shadow, but clad in black and gold armor wrought with the crest of the crown, a mantle of sable fur draped across broad shoulders. His hair, once tangled beneath a hood, now gleamed like obsidian under the torchlight. His face was clean, sharp as carved stone, and his eyes, those molten amber flames, scanned the hall with unshakable command. Arendor's breath stopped. The beggar, the Alpha King. The floor of the court trembled as the gathered nobles fell to their knees. Some gasped, some wept, some whispered prayers. All except Duke Marcellus, who stood rigid, his face blanching beneath the weight of realization. "You!" Marcellus hissed, his voice low with fury. "It was you!" The king mounted the dais with steady steps, his gaze locking on the Omega Prince who sat frozen. For a heartbeat, no one else existed in the throne room. Only Arendor, pale and wide-eyed, lips parted in disbelief. Alaric, the man he had kissed, the man he had nearly surrendered to, settled onto the throne. His voice carried like a blade across the hall. "The court questions the sanctity of the Omega Prince's choice," he said, his tone quiet but laced with steel. "They call his kiss a disgrace, a scandal, a lie." He leaned forward, eyes never leaving Arendor's. "Then let the truth be known. He did not kiss a beggar. He kissed his king." The hall erupted in gasps and shouts. Omegas clutched pearls, betas dropped fans, alphas snarled in disbelief. Arendor's heart thundered in his chest. The world tilted beneath him. He felt sick, betrayed, undone. All this time, Marcellus staggered forward, his voice trembling with rage. "You deceived us all, Majesty, disguising yourself as a beggar to mock the sacred rite. Enough." The king's voice cracked like thunder. The chamber fell silent. His golden eyes cut through the duke like fire. "You sought to claim what was not yours. You sought to cage a free heart, and for that, you stand exposed." Marcellus's mouth snapped shut, but hatred simmered in his eyes. Alaric turned back to Arendor, and his voice softened, though the hall still trembled with its echo. "The Omega Prince chose me with his kiss, and by law, by blood, by fate, it is binding." The world held its breath. Arendor's lips trembled, his hands clutched the arms of his seat. He could not look away from him, the beggar, the king, his king. But instead of relief, 1,000 emotions warred inside him: humiliation, fury, confusion, longing. He had kissed a man thinking it an escape, only to find himself bound to the most powerful alpha in the world, trapped, yet desired. Alaric's gaze softened, as though he could read every storm inside him, and quietly, so only Arendor could hear, he whispered across the space, "I am still yours." The throne room dissolved into chaos after Alaric's declaration. Some nobles shouted for annulment, others fell to their knees in praise. But the king's word was law. The mating ceremony had been sealed with the Omega Prince's kiss, Arendor's kiss, and none dared challenge it openly. Arendor's world, however, had collapsed in silence. He scarcely remembered being guided from the hall, scarcely noticed the weight of stairs following him. His body moved, but his mind spun in shards of disbelief. A beggar, a stranger, his king. When the chamber doors shut behind him, he found himself no longer alone. Alaric was there. No crown adorned his head now, no armor on his shoulders, only a simple black tunic, as though he sought to bridge the impossible gulf between them. Still, his presence filled the room, radiating strength and power that made the air itself seem charged. Arendor's hands curled into fists. "You deceived me." Alaric's amber eyes softened. "I tested you." "Tested?" Arendor's voice broke. trembling with fury and betrayal. "You let me think you were nothing. A beggar, a man with no name, no power. I kissed you to escape chains, and now I find I've bound myself to a king. Do you have any idea what you've done to me?" Alaric stepped closer, though careful, as though approaching a startled fawn. "I know what you think, that I tricked you, but understand this. I wore rags because I needed truth. I needed to know if even one Omega in this court would choose me without crown, without gold, without fear." He paused, his gaze locking with Arendor's trembling violet eyes. "And you did." The words struck like an arrow. Arendor wanted to shout, to turn away, to refuse the warmth that flared in his chest. But the memory of that kiss, tender, steady, like no other alpha's touch, rose unbidden. He whispered hoarsely, "You don't understand. All my life, alphas have looked at me like prey. They saw my body, not me. And when I kissed you, it was the first time I felt as if my choice was mine." Alaric's jaw tightened, then softened into something raw, almost aching. And it was. "Arendor, when you kissed me, you freed me too." Arendor's breath faltered. The king closed the distance slowly, raising a hand as though to touch his cheek, then stopping just short, awaiting permission. "I will never claim you by force. If you hate me, I will wear your hatred. But if you give yourself to me, it will be because you choose again, not because of law." Arendor's throat ached with unshed tears. His hand trembled as it lifted, not to push away, but to take that waiting hand and guide it to his cheek. The touch burned like fire and soothed like balm all at once. Why do you make it so hard to despise you?" he whispered. Alaric's lips curved faintly, but his eyes were molten with something deeper. "Because the bond between us was never false." The air grew thick, heavy with heat and unspoken longing. Alaric leaned down, his forehead brushing lightly against Arendor's, giving him the chance to pull away. But Arendor didn't. His lips parted with a trembling breath, his body yielding despite the storm inside him. Their mouths met, soft at first, hesitant, trembling with the weight of everything unspoken. Then deeper, hungrier, as though the fire they had denied finally roared free. Arendor gasped against him, his hands clutching the fabric of Alaric's tunic, pulling him closer instead of pushing away. The kiss was no longer escape, it was surrender. When they parted, breathless, Arendor's lips still tingled, his body weak against the king's steady strength. Alaric's thumb brushed tenderly across his lower lip. "See me, not the crown," he murmured, "not the power, not the name, just me. That is all I want from you." Arendor shivered, his heart unmoored. For the first time, he wondered if perhaps he could. The royal chambers were quiet but alive with candlelight, shadows flickering across silk-draped walls. Beyond the arched windows, the moon spilled silver across polished marble, bathing the room in a glow that seemed far too intimate for a king and his unwilling mate. Arendor stood near the balcony, the night breeze tangling through his hair, his chest rising and falling in uneven rhythm. His mind screamed that he should resist, that he should run, that an Omega prince did not belong in the bed of the man who had deceived him. And yet, his body betrayed him. His lips still burned with Alaric's kiss, his skin still remembered the steady warmth of his touch. Behind him, footsteps padded softly, strong but unhurried, as though the king refused to stalk him like prey. "I will not command you," Alaric's voice came, low and husky, filled with restraint. "But if you stay tonight, Arendor, let it be because you wish it." Arendor turned, his throat tight. Alaric stood with the firelight painting golden against his dark tunic, his amber eyes glowing like molten metal. That gaze was not the gaze of a king assessing property. It was raw hunger, yes, but also reverence. Slowly, as if surrendering to a force beyond himself, Arendor crossed the space between them. He lifted his chin, meeting Alaric's eyes, his breath trembling. "I should despise you, and yet, all I want is this." His words barely left his lips before Alaric claimed them in a searing kiss. The king's mouth was hot, demanding, but not cruel. His hand cupped Arendor's jaw, tilting his head back as the Omega's lips parted willingly, gasping into the kiss. Their tongues brushed, igniting fire that raced down Arendor's spine. His knees weakened, his body pressed flush against the broad chest of his alpha. Alaric broke the kiss only to trail down the line of Arendor's throat, biting lightly, then soothing with his tongue. The Omega's soft cry filled the chamber, his fingers tangling desperately in the king's hair. You taste of defiance, Alaric murmured against his skin, his voice thick with desire. And yet you melt for me. Arinder's only answer was the arch of his body, the trembling surrender of his breath. Strong hands lifted him easily, carrying him to the vast bed draped in velvet. Alaric laid him down gently, hovering above him, giving him one last chance to turn away. But Arinder reached first, tugging at the ties of his tunic, bearing the powerful lines of the Alpha's chest. "Don't make me beg," Arinder whispered, violet eyes dark with want. Alaric's control snapped. He lowered himself fully, their bodies colliding in heat and friction. Clothes were shed with feverish haste, silks pooling on the floor. Skin against skin, every brush set nerves aflame. Alaric's mouth worshipped every inch. Arinder's collarbone, the delicate curve of his waist, the trembling hollow of his stomach, until the Omega writhed beneath him, half mad with need. When Alaric finally entered him, slow and careful, Arinder's cry was a mixture of shock and rapture. The stretch was overwhelming, yet the Alpha moved with patience, letting the Omega's body adjust, coaxing him open with kisses and whispered praise. "You're mine," Alaric breathed raggedly, pressing deep. "Not by law, not by crown, but because your body calls to me, your soul answers mine." Arinder's hands clutched his shoulders, nails digging into flesh as his head fell back against the pillows. "Yes," he gasped, his voice breaking. "Yes, Alaric." Their rhythm built, the chamber echoing with breathless moans and the steady cadence of bodies moving as one. The world outside ceased to exist. There was only heat, only the slick slide of skin, only the bond tightening with every thrust. When release finally tore through them, it was like shattering. Pleasure so fierce it bordered pain, a rush that left Arinder trembling, clinging to Alaric as though he would never let him go. The king gathered him close, kissing the sweat-damp hair at his temple, his chest heaving. "No throne, no kingdom," he whispered hoarsely. "Only you, always you." Arinder buried his face against him, still quivering, and for the first time that night he allowed himself to believe it. The first light of dawn spilled through the high arched windows, gilding the silken sheets in pale gold. The night's fever had burned itself into the bed, the air still heavy with the scent of sweat, musk, and something deeper, bonding, though unspoken. Arinder stirred first. He lay tangled in Alaric's arms, the king's body warm and solid against his back. His head rested on a strong chest that rose and fell with the steady rhythm of sleep. Every shift of his body reminded him of the night before. The ache, the heat, the whispered confessions that had shattered the walls around his heart. For a moment, he simply lay there, listening to the powerful heartbeat beneath his ear. For a moment, he let himself believe. But reality crept in like a cold draft. He was an Omega prince, sworn into a bond before the entire court. And the man who held him so gently was not just Alaric the Beggar, not just Alaric the man, but Alaric the Alpha King. Would the tenderness of the night remain, once the crown returned to his head, or would he too treat Arinder as nothing more than a prize? The questions stung. He shifted slightly, trying to untangle himself, but a strong arm tightened around his waist. "Leaving already?" Alaric's voice was rough with sleep, but warm. His eyes opened slowly, golden even in the dim morning light. Arinder stilled, caught. I thought kings rose early to sit their thrones." Alaric smiled faintly, nuzzling into his hair. "This morning, I sit my throne here." His lips brushed against the delicate curve of Arinder's shoulder, a kiss that made the Omega's breath catch. "You are my kingdom, little flame." The words ignited a blush across Arinder's cheeks, but he turned away, hiding it. "You shouldn't say such things. They sound like lies." Alaric's expression softened, almost wounded. He tilted Arinder's chin until their eyes met. "Then let me prove they're not." Another kiss followed, slow, unhurried, nothing like the desperate hunger of the night before. It was gentle, reverent, as if he wished to seal the promise into Arinder's very skin. The Omega's body betrayed him again, melting into the touch, sighing softly into the Alpha's mouth. For one blissful instant, he forgot the court, forgot the laws, forgot everything except the man who kissed him as though he were sacred. But the knock at the chamber doors shattered the spell. "My king," came a muffled, urgent voice. "Forgive the intrusion, but Duke Marcellus demands audience. He calls the ceremony binding unlawful, that he was promised the Omega Prince." Arindor stiffened, blood running cold. Alaric's expression darkened, sharp as a blade. He sat upright, drawing Arindor instinctively against his side. His golden eyes blazed with fury, though his voice remained steady. "Tell the Duke he will have audience in the council chamber, not here." The messenger bowed and hurried off. Silence fell. Arindor's hands clutched the sheets, knuckles pale. "This is what I fear. The court will never accept me. They'll call me weak, unworthy, a scandal." Alaric turned to him, his gaze unwavering. "Let them whisper. Let them curse. I am their king and you are my chosen. No duke, no noble, no law will change that." But Arindor's heart still trembled. Last night he had given himself to Alaric the man. Now he must face Alaric the king and the storm that awaited them both. Alaric pressed a final kiss to his temple, then rose, his body every inch the monarch now, golden and unshaken. "Stay here, my flame. This battle is mine to fight." Arindor's lips parted, but no words came. He could only watch as the man who had held him so tenderly only hours ago left to face the wolves at his door. The council chamber was vast and cold, lined with carved pillars of obsidian that reached toward the vaulted ceiling. Every noble alpha, beta, and advisor had gathered, voices already rising in heated dispute before the king had even entered. At the center stood Duke Marcellus. His wolfish smile was sharp, predatory, his dark cloak sweeping the floor as though he already claimed victory. "This farce cannot stand," he thundered to the assembled court. "An Omega prince of noble blood bound to a beggar in disguise. It is deceit, it is unlawful. That kiss was stolen under false pretenses. This mating must be annulled." Murmurs rippled across the chamber. Some nobles nodded, others shifted uneasily. The great doors groaned open. Alaric entered, clad in the black and gold regalia of kingship, the fire of command in his eyes. The voices died instantly, as though the very air bent beneath his will. He strode to the dais, the silence broken only by the echo of his boots across stone. His gaze found Marcellus, and fixed like a blade. "You dare call unlawful what the gods themselves sealed before the eyes of the realm?" Marcellus sneered. "You tricked him. You hid your identity to deceive the Omega into what?" Alaric's voice cut through the chamber like thunder. "Into choosing freely, without pressure, without lust for crown or power? Tell me, Duke, what Omega would you win if stripped of your title and gold?" A hush fell. Several nobles looked away, ashamed. Marcellus's face darkened. "You overstep. I had rightful claim to Prince Arindor. His house promised him to me. His body is not a treaty," Alaric growled, the alpha dominance in his voice reverberating through every stone of the chamber. "He is no coin to be traded, no slave to your greed. He is my mate, and before this court, I will bind him as such." Gasps swept the assembly. The words were no mere claim. They were a declaration of intent to mark, to bite, to bond, to make Arindor irrevocably his before gods and men. Marcellus's composure snapped. He bared his teeth like a beast, his wolf aura flooding the chamber. "You would taint the throne with an Omega's weakness." Alaric's fury flared like wildfire. He stepped down from the dais, his aura crushing the air, forcing lesser alphas to bow their heads in submission. Even Marcellus staggered, sweat beating at his temple. "Say weak again," Alaric hissed, "and I will show this council the strength of the Omega who chose me, strong enough to defy you, strong enough to tame even a king." The chamber quaked with silence. Marcellus's jaw clenched, but he fell back, unable to meet the raw force radiating from his sovereign. Alaric turned, raising his voice for all to hear. "This court will bear witness. Arindor is my chosen, my Omega, my future queen." The council erupted into chaos, some cheering, some protesting, but none could deny the authority in the king's words. Alaric swept from the chamber, his cloak trailing like fire behind him. But as he left, his thoughts were not of victory. They were of Arindor, waiting in the chamber, trembling beneath the weight of all that had just been spoken. For tonight, the world knew him not as the beggar in the shadows, nor even the Alpha King, but as the mate of an Omega whose single kiss had rewritten fate. Back in the quiet chamber, Arindor paced restlessly, fingers twisting in the folds of his robe. His skin still remembered Alaric's touch, his lips still trembled from last night's kisses, but his mind, it was a battlefield. A knock startled him. The doors opened and Alaric entered, his presence filling the room even before he spoke. He wore no crown now, though his aura made it impossible to forget what he was. They know, Alaric said simply, his voice deep but steady. The council, the realm. I declared you mine before them all. Arindor froze, breath caught. You, what? I told them I would mark you. His golden eyes burned, but his voice softened. But only if you want it. Arindor, I will never bind you by force. Last night you gave yourself to me. That is enough to sustain, until you choose. Truly choose. Arindor's knees weakened, his chest tight. The word mark rang in his head like a bell tolling fate. To be marked was to surrender completely, body and soul. A bond that could never be undone. His voice trembled. I don't know if I'm ready. Alaric stepped closer, slow, careful. He touched Arindor's face gently, his thumb brushing away a tear Arindor hadn't realized had fallen. Then I will wait. Whether it is tomorrow or 10 years from now, you are already mine. The mark will only seal what my heart already knows. The Omega swallowed hard, his resolve cracking under the weight of such tenderness. His hands clutched Alaric's tunic, pulling him into an embrace that was almost desperate. Stay, Arindor whispered against his chest. Just stay with me. And Alaric did, holding him until the storm inside him quieted. But peace could not last. Duke Marcellus would not be defeated by words alone. In the dead of night, he gathered his loyalists, whispering treachery, sowing rebellion. The whispers reached even the palace guards. Alaric knew it was coming. The confrontation could not be avoided. When the Duke stormed into the great hall with armed followers, Alaric was already waiting. His crown gleamed under torchlight, his stance unshakable. And at his side, Arindor trembling but resolute, refusing to hide any longer. This kingdom will not bow to a queenless king, Marcellus spat, pointing at Arindor, nor to a weakling Omega who disgraces our laws. The insult sliced deep, but before Arindor could falter, Alaric's hand closed over his. Then you bow to both, the king thundered. For he is my strength, not my weakness. He is my mate, and I will prove it before gods and men. And with the court watching, Alaric turned to Arindor, baring his neck in rare vulnerability. A king lowering himself before an Omega. Arindor's breath hitched. The chamber waited. Slowly, trembling, he leaned forward and pressed his lips to the skin where a mark would lie. His choice, his will, his heart. The bond surged between them, flooding the hall with such power that even the air trembled. Light seemed to dance across their skin, a divine acknowledgement. Marcellus roared in fury, but his rebellion crumbled beneath the weight of a bond the gods themselves had sealed. Guards seized him. His allies faltered. The Duke's fate was sealed as surely as Arindor's and Alaric's had been. Days later, the kingdom gathered not for war, but for celebration. The court no longer whispered of scandal, they whispered of fate. Arindor walked down the aisle of the great hall in robes of white and violet, silks shimmering like dawn. At the dais, Alaric awaited, his crown gleaming, but his eyes fixed only on him. Their hands clasped, their bond humming between them, visible to all who watched. When the vows were spoken, Alaric leaned close, whispering only for Arindor to hear. You once kissed a beggar to escape chains. Now kiss your king, and bind me to you forever. Arindor smiled, tears glistening as he pressed their lips together. The court erupted in thunderous acclaim. But to them, it was not the crown, nor the bond, nor the throne that mattered. It was the kiss. The same kiss that had begun in desperation, now transformed into devotion. Spring sunlight poured through the palace gardens, gilding the blossoms of lavender and rose. The kingdom had long since quieted after the scandal of the ceremony. Whispers had become songs, songs had become tales, and the tale was always the same, of the Omega prince who kissed a beggar, only to find he had kissed his king. Arindor walked slowly along the garden path, one hand resting instinctively against his swollen belly. The child within stirred strong and restless just like its father. You'll be impatient, won't you? Arindor whispered with a soft smile. Just like him. Behind him, warm hands slipped around his waist, steadying him. Talking to our heir again? Alaric's voice was deep, teasing, his breath stirring against Arindor's ear. Arindor laughed quietly, leaning back into the embrace. The babe listens more than you do. Impossible, Alaric murmured, pressing a kiss to his temple. No one listens more to you than I. They stood together in the quiet, the Omega's body framed by the Alpha's strength, the crown of the king forgotten in the grass where he had set it down. Alaric's hand joined Arendor's upon his belly, feeling the faint kick beneath. His eyes softened with awe every time, as though he could scarcely believe this miracle belonged to him. "Our child will never know chains," Alaric swore softly, "never know fear. They will know only the love of two parents who would burn the world to keep them safe." Arendor's eyes glistened. "From beggar to king, and still you say such things." Alaric chuckled, then turned him gently, lowering his forehead to touch Arendor's. "From beggar to king, I was never more than yours. Always." Their lips met in a kiss, slow, deep, achingly sweet. Not the desperate kiss of defiance at the mating ceremony, nor the fiery kiss of their first night, but the steady, eternal kiss of two souls bound forever. When they parted, Arendor whispered against his mouth, "Our child will grow up hearing this story, won't they? How their father once kissed a beggar and changed the world." Alaric smiled, golden eyes bright. "No," he said softly, "they'll hear how their father once kissed his fate, and found his forever, and beneath the blossoming spring sky, the king and his Omega stood, their bond sealed not by crown or law, but by love, by choice, and by the life growing between them." The end. Hey everyone, thanks for watching. Kindly comment below if you loved it. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon for more amazing content. Drop a comment with your favorite moment, and I'll see you in the next one.